How may the four teams drafting ahead of Carolina next Thursday night impact the 19th pick? We'll talk about it right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, and today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. We are so close to night one of the 2026 NFL Draft. Matter of fact, next Thursday, we will get the answer to what Carolina's going to do with the 19th pick. Will they stay put? Will they move up? Will they move back? Who will they take? All that will be figured out. So on today's show, want to have another guest on, Damian Parson of Locked On NFL Draft, but wanted to find a new angle to discuss the 19th pick in the draft overall. We're going to take a look at picks 15, 16, 17, and 18 and try to figure out how the Panthers could be impacted there at 19th overall based off of what those teams in front of them do with the 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th pick. So let's go and get into it right here with Damian Parson of Locked On NFL Draft. All right, back with us here on Locked On Panthers for the second time this offseason is the host of Locked On NFL Draft, Damian Parson. Check him out over on socials at DP_NFL. Damian, what's going on, my man?
Oh, man, it was 2 weeks away, a little less than 2 weeks, 10 days, I believe it is, to the kickoff round one for the 2026 NFL Draft. When that home stretch, that straightaway, I'm just ready for it to get here at this point.
You're ready? I'm ready, man. I've been ready for it to get there. I know we were talking about before we popped on here, doing like just a team-specific show. You only have so many angles you can really go with this whole deal, where you get the entire draft, all 32 teams, all these players. Yep. I run out of things to say. I run out of ideas, but I do think I have a different idea on today's show than we've been doing over the last couple of weeks here on Locked On Panthers. I know you did mock draft last week. I want to go back over that mock, but really look at the teams directly in front of Carolina. So that's Tampa at 15, the Jets at 16, Detroit at 17, and Minnesota at 18. And look at how they may impact the Panthers once Carolina gets on the board at 19, assuming that they stay there at 19th overall next Thursday night there in Pittsburgh. Let's start off with their division rival, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You have them going with Kenyon, Sadiq, the tight end out of Oregon. There were a lot of Panther fans, myself included, hosting this podcast, that would love for Sadiq to be on the board at 19 and to solve the lack of just explosive playmaking that's been there at the tight end position since Greg Olsen. That's not been there since Greg Olsen was injured, then departed, then retired. So Tampa, why Tampa? Why Sadiq there at 15?
Oh, man. So, for me with Tampa being at 15, I looked at it from an aspect of losing Mike Evans. He was kind of their true big play threat down the field. Even that is, him being a little bit longer in the tooth towards the back nine of his career, he was still a guy that could take the top off with his height, his stride, and then the ball skills. And then losing that explosiveness or that big play ability from Mike Evans, I was like, man, you have to kind of compensate for that. And being at 15, yes, they brought back K. Otten, but K. Otten is more of a catch and get what's there type of tight end, a good blocker in the run game. They don't have that explosiveness. Right now, their wide receiver core is Jalen McMillan, Emeka Egbuka, who came on really strong, really hot early in the season, suffered the hamstring. He wasn't the same for the rest of the year. And then you have Chris Godwin, who's like a year, would be like post year of him getting hurt and then coming back and taking less money to come back to Tampa. And I was like, you know what they need? Like, they want to be a team that runs the football. You come out in 12 personnel, and with a guy like Kenyon Sadiq, gives them that flexibility to live in 12, flex him out into the slot, get some advantageous matchups, but off the run game with Baker Mayfield's arm strength, things of that nature, drive that seam ball right up the field, get those 20, 30-yard chunks off of play action. It makes a lot of sense rather than trying to compensate for the loss of Mike Evans with another first-round wide receiver. I was like, I don't think they'll do that back-to-back years, but a guy like Kenyon Sadiq can really elevate that passing offense and help them in the run game with his ability to block.
I mean, is there really a wide receiver who would be available at 15 that you think would be the mold of Mike Evans at all?
No. I mean, some people try to point to Denzel Boston, who we really like at Locked NFL Draft, but yeah, he doesn't have the vertical speed that Mike Evans had, even in Mike Evans' younger days, especially. I probably would take Mike Evans vertically now over Denzel Boston. You know what I mean? So I was like, yeah, that's not really where he wins. He wins more of a back shoulder fade, short area route runner, first and second level. So I'm like, no, there isn't a guy at receiver that makes sense to try and replace what Mike Evans brought to this team.
So Tampa, looking at it, that's a team that would be a threat for a tight end, likely, in your opinion, not a wide receiver. Any other positions? Because I think for Carolina, I've seen, as far as mock drafts go, I've seen offensive tackle at 19. I've seen wide receiver at 19. I know that's what you have. We'll talk about that momentarily. I've seen safety at 19. Is Tampa looking at any of those positions other than tight end, you would think?
Linebacker, of course, with the loss with the Levante David, definitely a position. I remember talking to a scout that I'm close to with the Bucks, and I was like, hey, this was before Levante David announced his retirement. Like, what's the two biggest needs? And he was like, linebacker and edge. He's like, that's what we need right now. And so those are when the way that the board fell, this is a deep linebacker class. I was like, they can get a guy on day 2, a Jake Galday, CJ Allen, potentially out of Georgia, slipping the round 2, because people are over analyzing his pro day videos. And, we know how it gets on Twitter to late in the draft cycle. Everybody's just kind of scatterbrained, looking for something to overanalyze and talk about. So I was like, yeah, I'll trust the tape that he can drop back off in coverage and work sideline to sideline with no problem. The film is the film, and I trust that. Pro D workouts do nothing for me. So I could actually see him slip. And he didn't run the 40, I don't believe, and he came in like 6'1". So I could see teams like, you know what? He doesn't check some of the requisite boxes, which I think from a height, weight, and even speed standpoint, he's almost identical to Roquan Smith, who was a top 10 pick. You know what I mean? So
what's the concern?
I'm just like, all right, this is what we're going to do with it. As we've applauded and loved Roquan his entire career, we see a guy shaped similar. I think he's probably a better athlete than Roquan was coming out. And we just say, we'll wait to round 2. So I think that's a situation where the depth of this linebacker class, Anthony Hill Jr. from Texas, I think Tampa Bay probably can say, you know what, we'll wait for a linebacker. If a top edge were to fall to 15, like if a Ruben Bain or somebody fell to 15, I can see them running that card up and say, you know what, let's get the edge rusher. But since none of those guys were really there that could really bolster their pass rush, I felt like, you know what, tight end makes a lot of sense.
Okay, and that's good to know, too, because Carolina, I think, should still be looking for a linebacker. They have met with Jacob Rodriguez and went to his pro day. A couple other prospects they're taking a look at. And I actually talked about CJ Allen, I think, 2 weeks ago, of Clint Shamblin of Locked On Bulldogs. And Clint also gave the Roquan Smith comparison. So a little wild to me, because I thought going into the fall that him and Anthony Hill Jr. from Texas were both going to be first-round type of dudes. And it seems as the season's played out, maybe the production wasn't there for Anthony Hill, but CJ Allen, I don't really understand what the situation is. The issue is maybe because it's a deep linebacker class, no reason to go get a guy early unless it's like an Arvell Reese, who I guess people look at as more as a edge guy or than a Sonny Styles. Both of those guys tested off the charts. That defense at Ohio State was great this past year. Not many question marks about those two. So for Carolina, though, when I'm thinking about linebacker, if they want to wait till the second round, Tampa's sitting at 46, Carolina's at 51. So the Bucs could be a team that could block them. Maybe you got to move ahead of them. You want to get your guy on day 2. So good to know that. We'll take a look at the Jets as well. They got Casey Concepcion. You have them taking Casey Concepcion, who is not a native of Charlotte, but did play high school football here at was Vance, now Chambers High School, with NC State, transferred to A&M. We talked about him on the show last week, I believe. All the days are blending together at this point in time, but he is a guy who is excellent, can be an excellent returner, can be at slot, can be on the outside. You have him going to the Jets, and the Jets need a bunch of help. Why New York, and also kind of what else do you think New York be looking at that may get in Carolina's way for a certain prospect? Because I do think KC would have been someone who would have made a lot of sense for Carolina at 19.
Absolutely. I think, that fit with the Jets. They lost John Mechie. John Mechie signed with the Panthers and everything, reuniting with Bryce Young. So losing him, who was he played a lot of that slot role once he came over via the acquisition and everything. Casey Concepcion being able to play the slot, play that Z role. I just did a film breakdown over on my YouTube channel called The Scouting Room, breaking down his tape. And this is, I promise you, if he had a more accurate quarterback, he's got to work with some of the hand mechanics. He's kind of a clapper with his hands instead of just a diamond like the old school way they would teach us to catch the football growing up, aging myself a little bit, the diamond, throw up the rock a little bit, right? And you let the ball get trapped in there rather than he brings his hands together at the catch point as a clapper. So that's where you see some of the concentration situations there, but the jugs machine can absolutely fix that.
When you say the clapper, I'm sorry, the first image I think of is that image of that little kid trying to catch the ball and then going like that. Like that's all that's all. Like, I'm sorry for the people watching on audio. You know what I'm talking about. It's like the blonde little bull-headed kid. The ball is like coming up there.
It's like a beach ball or something like that. Yeah. He tries to grab it and it just completely whiffs it. Yes. That's the perfect way to explain that for those who haven't seen it. But I remember because he had a catch against LSU in the end zone where he does that. The ball comes to him and he just brings his hands and trap the ball. And I'm like, if you just throw up the diamond, it's going to be a lot easier for you. So it's like the hand mechanics thing is what will prevent him, because from a talent standpoint, and I'll say this, like, I love Jordan Tyson. He's my wide receiver one. I know a lot of the people have the injury concerns. Casey Concepcion, from a skill to skill, talent to talent, he's up there with Carnell Tate, Jordan Tyson, Mekhi Lemon. And to be completely honest, I feel like he has a more translatable game and skill set than a couple of those guys that's in front of him. It's just more so the drops that people like to hinge on and hang on when it pertains to him. Better. He's truly the best yak threat out of all four of my top four wide receivers. He's better than Mekhi Lemon. He gives you more short area quickness. Heck, you talk about NC State. They ran inside zone with this dude, like as a running back. And he's just pinballing off of linebackers. And I love Mekhi Lemon after the catch. I get more explosiveness, more dynamicism, more elusiveness from a Casey Concepcion. He's an easy target. So I think for Geno Smith coming in, I think Geno's going to play better behind that offensive line with the Jets than he did behind that terrible offensive line they had in Las Vegas last year. You have Garrett Wilson. You hope Adonai Mitchell takes that step forward. But I think putting Casey, I would say put him early in the slot, let him be that chain mover, that security blanket for Geno. And then for me, it's all about using these picks this year to build this roster up. So next year, when you get your quarterback, the roster's ready with talent to help that quarterback out.
Yeah, and thing too about Casey, I know you did a show last week as well discussing just the perfect fits, and you had Carolina and you had Casey Concepcion as both being the perfect fit. Why is that?
So, I go back to, me and Keith talked this through. I go back to when Bryce was at Bama, and they went and got, I want to say traded for. That's how college football feels now with the transfer portal, like trades and free agency. But they went and they got in the portal, Jameson Williams, and how he unlocked a lot for Bryce. Like, Bryce isn't the best vertical thrower. He creates explosives off of horizontal deep shots, those deep overs and bender routes and things of that nature, even deep posts. If you get split safeties or you get single high, you get to pull a safety one direction with a Teteroy McMillan, T-Mac, and then you throw that post route to that vertical guy, and the middle of the field is open. Bryce can do that. Now, outside the numbers is where you probably have some concern. But I think thinking about what Jameson Williams did for Bryce and how Bryce and him connected so well, he doesn't have that on this roster. Jalen Coker and Teteroy McMillan, those are the twin towers. Those are the big body guys, the contested catch guys. They're going to make plays, boxing guys out, being physical, using their frame. They need that type of guy like a Casey Concepcion that brings that chain mover, that yak threat, that explosive threat. I think they wanted Jimmy Horn Jr. to be that. Jimmy Horn had, like, his drops were way more consistent at Colorado. Like, he would just be open and drop a pass, and he's like, Jimmy.
And the last time we saw him out there, it was 4th and season, and he dropped it.
Yeah, like, you got to catch that, right? So it's like there's some concentration and not confidence with his hands, where I feel that it stemmed from college to the NFL with Jimmy, and I think Jimmy's probably better suited as a depth piece and a special teamer, punt, kick return, field flipper, because he's an explosive player, but you got to figure out how to get him to catch the ball consistently. I think Casey Concepcion gives Bryce that guy that you want to run those OTB routes, those quick hitches. I don't want just a big body catching it and then, okay, we get 5, we get 5. No, I want to get that 5 off the catch and have the threat to get 17 after that. Casey Concepcion brings it. I think because I'll say this, Julian, when I look at Bryce, physically, he's not going to improve. That's just how God made him. He's 5'11", 190, right? It just is what it is.
He's smaller than me.
Yeah, I mean, you can't tell me if you put the team around him that you can't get a Brock Purdy level of production out of him. And I think that's what if I'm looking at Dan Morgan, that's my idea. It's like, okay, I want to put the weapons around you that's going to allow you to just play point guard. Same thing with Kyle Shanahan and what they do with San Fran. The CMC factor. That's why I think the Panthers need that pass-catching running back out of the backfield to force teams out of man-to-man coverage and make them play zone. Because when Brock faces man, he struggles. When they have CMC in the backfield, it's like, well, I can't put a linebacker on this dude because he cooks them. We got to play zone. And then Brock is just dialing it up with anticipatory throws. I think Bryce can be that level of quarterback, but a guy like Casey Concepcion or that archetype needs to be in flux in this offense.
Okay, and it's interesting you do the Brock Purdy San Francisco comparison because Darrell Bevell was there in Miami the last couple of years with Mike McDaniel, who came from San Francisco, and there's a lot of talk now this offseason about trying to bring some of those Shanahan, especially in the run game principles, to this offense that's now going to be coordinated and called by Brad Idzik. So be curious to see if you're going to get more Brock Purdy out of Bryce Young this upcoming season. I don't know how many Panther fans are going to like hearing that, but Brock's been a good quarterback, man. He started Super Bowl. I don't think it's a bad comparison as far as you look at how both of them are physically limited, height-wise, probably arm strength-wise as well, but both have shown they got the goods when they're in the right situation. So let's take a quick pause. We'll come back and look at picks 17 and 18 and discuss those and how that can impact Carolina here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment, that's not the most convenient. Sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade into it. TurboTax now is in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve while you get a real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to TurboTax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment today. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill still sitting open. When the pressure's on, you need to right hire. This is a job for Sponsored Jobs. Indeed, Sponsored Jobs helps you reach people who actually fit what you're looking for, skills, experience, location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In a minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates. Check all your boxes, less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire. This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. All right, looking at the other picks that you have, Detroit 17th overall. You have them taking Spencer Fano, the offensive tackle out of Utah. Minnesota 18th, you have them taking Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, the safety out of Toledo. I actually talked about him extensively last week on our Prospect of the Day on our bonus episode here on Locked On Panthers. Let's start off with Minnesota because every single mock draft I've seen has been consistent with the Vikings. Them taking Dylan Thieneman, the safety out of Oregon. Now, yours doesn't have that. You have them taking a safety. I honestly, this is the first time I've seen them not take Thieneman, but it's also the 50th time I've seen them take a safety at that spot. And Carolina, I do think safety should be something they're looking at. Obviously, Caleb Downs will not be there. Dylan Thieneman, if he's on the board, most people believe he will not be there because he's going to go to Minnesota. So it's been Emmanuel McNeil-Warren that's been going to Carolina in some of these mocks. I think Bruce Feldman had him going there. I want to say Mel Kiper Jr. a couple weeks had him going there. Where's Tiedemann in your mock draft, first off? And then McNeil-Warren and just the overall what Minnesota be looking at 18, because it feels like safety is what they would be blocking Carolina from getting as far as their top choice there at 19.
Yeah. So Dylan Tiedemann actually went 12 to Dallas, to the Cowboys for me. And so that's why he wasn't available because I've definitely mocked him. I've lost count how many times I mocked him to the Vikings. Like, I was like, this just feels like, I feel like we've been trying to replace Harrison Smith for the Vikings for like the last 5 to 6 years. And it just feels like the way that last game went in Minnesota was kind of that, last hurrah. Thank you for your services. We love you. But, it's either he's retiring or he's going somewhere else in free agency type of feel. So I'm like, that leaves a big hole in that secondary. Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, and I said this on the pod, he's not, I feel like teams are going to try to overcorrect. They do this every year, actually, Julian. They overthink a prospect, see the prospect hit. It's like, man, we can't do that again. And it was Nicky Minwari from South Carolina last year, who was a first-round caliber talent. I had him as, I think, a top 3 safety for me. And I watched everybody like on Twitter, again, because the draft season's long, pick his game apart. Like, oh, I don't think this is going to work. Next thing you know, he goes to Mike McDonald. He's playing that slot nickel safety role. He's locking down actual receivers. He's +1 in the run game. He's explosive as all get out. I remember being at his pro day, and I'm like, this dude looks like a safety you would create in the lab. Like, he looks every bit of that in person. And we saw that and how he impacted that Seattle Seahawks defense. I feel like teams will probably try to overcorrect. Like, well, we can get that same thing out of EMW. He's not the same caliber athlete. He, to me, is that pure strong safety that's going to be a +1 in the run game, heavy hitter in the box, a guy that I think has the ability to match up with tight ends with his size and athleticism, his frame. I think he's going to be a really good player. And I would put him at 18 made a lot of sense to me, because I'm like, Brian Flores is all about having his chess piece in that secondary and be able to move that guy around. And I think just the way that the Seahawks use Nicky Minwari as that kind of chess piece and everything, I think teams will try to copycat that as well, finding the big safety that can be a big nickel, big dime defensive back and play closer to the line of scrimmage, because you're getting dual responsibility. Hey, you can cover, whether it's man or zone, but we know that you're going to be a sure tackler and a heavy hitter in the run game. Just in case we need you to run fit, you can do that as well. And that's a big part of playing nickel. So that's one of those situations where it's like, I know that if this would have happened, the Vikings would be like, man, Thielemann's gone. But we have a guy that we can absolutely get at 18, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren.
Do you think there's any way Minnesota's not going safety? I mean, is it just that obvious?
I mean, they've done it so many times when it was obvious before. I definitely think there's a chance that they could say, yeah, we've seen your mocks, but we're actually going to a different position.
So what would they go with if they don't go safety then?
So of course, to me,
because everyone keeps mocking safety, so I don't even know.
I think if another corner fell, or if one of these other corners kind of climbed up the board. No, Chris Johnson from San Diego State, his stock is rising into that late round one in a situation. But especially being in that war room, you're talking to Brian Flores and like, hey, does any of these corners like really fit what you're looking for? And if Flores gives you the go-ahead, you make the pick, right? Because he's the one calling that defense. He's the one structuring it. And him being able to then move guys around, just confuse and frustrate opposing quarterbacks makes a lot of sense, right? Especially, you're dealing with Jordan Love in your division. You have Jared Goff, who, if you get pressure to him, you see him wilter under the pressure. But if you can't get back there, you better be able to cover, because he's going to slice and dice you. And Caleb Williams is Weapon X, is what I like to call him. And everything. You're just hoping that, hey, you don't find consistency with your ball placement, because if he does, it's going to be, he might be the guy in your division for the next 10 to 15 years, and you got to deal with that. So I think for them, it could be corner. The one spot that I think is very, very underrated for them is running back. But in this running back class, I don't think they take one at 18. No. I really do like Jadarian Price at Notre Dame, the backup to Jeremiah Love, but 18 is way too rich for me. So I don't think they go. I think they probably could go corner, and we'll see. I mean, if another linebacker fell, or if an edge rusher was there, they might try to get another guy like that. I personally think it's going to be pure defense wherever they go.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I feel like, safety is what's been mocked, but corner, Carolina could go for corner at 19. I have seen that they did meet with last week Jamal McCoy from Tennessee. He ain't gonna be there at 19. There's talk that he could be now after like his testing, because we didn't see him play last year with the torn ACL, but he was excellent back in 2024. Now the last time we did see him play football, he was getting cooked by Jeremiah Smith. But I mean, who hasn't at this point in time? He's good player. Not sorry to bring up old stuff, Tennessee fans. They listen to the pod and watch it, but good player. But he'll likely either be CB1 or it's going to be CB2 behind our guy down there at LSU, whose name is now escaping me as I'm saying. Mansour Delane. Yep, there we go. Mansour Delane. So I don't know. I know they've talked to Jalen Kilgore. Don't think that would be that big of a deal for Carolina if Minnesota does go for corner at 18. Before we take another pause, Spencer Fano, Utah, you have him going to who's this again? Detroit at 17. Which feels like a very Lions pick that they would get an offensive lineman with that pick. And the Lions took a guy that I wanted Carolina to get desperately a couple years ago, and Penei Sewell. I was saying on the show, Penei Sewell or we riot. And, well, there was no riots because Penei Sewell was not on the board anymore. And he's been a great player for the Lions playing at right tackle. And maybe there's been some talk about him moving to left this year. It doesn't really matter. Good player, fits what Dan Campbell wants out of an offensive lineman, wants out of a football player in general. Where do you have all these tackles going so far? Because I think from what I've seen, Fano, almost call him Spano, Dean Spanos, owner of the Chargers, but Spencer Fano, he is seemingly more of a right tackle, potentially a guard. I know there's been some concerns about Francis Mauigoa with his medicals. He's apparently going to have a retest here in the coming days. Where do you have these guards going off the board prior to 17?
So in my mock, because I did something a little different, when I was in my top 10, I was like, not putting Jeremiah Love as a chalky pick to the Titans. I wanted to say, what does it look like if he slipped down the board a little bit? He went to 7 to the Commanders, who I would absolutely love him, and Jaden Daniels in the backfield. I had Francis Mauigoa, CC Mauigoa going 11 to the Dolphins. The Dolphins have Austin Jackson at right tackle, I believe is coming up on a contract. And then they brought in Jamari Salyer from the Chargers, I think he was there a couple years ago as a potential starter, ended up losing his job. They drafted guys to take the spot from him. I think he's battled injuries, and that might have been just a one-year deal situation too. So I'm like, with him, CC Mauigoa comes in and either plays right tackle for you, or he kicks in that guard and plays guard in your starting lineup. You got to protect Malik. Well, heck, dear God, you said, hey, we're going to give you money and then let go of your top receiver, and now you got to draft receivers in the 2026 NFL draft to fix that room, which is one of the worst receiving rooms. No, it's probably the worst receiving room in the league right now as constructed. Well, you know what? Let's make sure we protect you, number one, and let's get maybe make sure we can block for Devon Achane as long as he doesn't get traded. So I had CC Mauigoa going there, and then of course Spencer Fano being my second tackle off the board, going to 17.
So these are the tackles you have going off the board early. Yeah. So because I've seen like Monroe Freeling. There's been talk about like going even up to the Browns at 6.
Yeah.
I'm like, he's gonna go early. Like
he's talented, man, but he's green. He is green. Okay. Like I know there's some Panther fans who chatted with me like, yeah, well if he's there at 19, make the pick, and I'm like. And this is a pivotal year, in my opinion, for this offense, for this team, for Bryce. You just tasted the postseason. You know what that feels like now, right? I remember all those years in the NBA. It's almost rite of passage. You get a young team, get to the playoffs. They don't win, but they learn their lesson. Like the Warriors were like that. This series versus the Spurs and Manu Ginobili and all of them and Tony Parker.
The Charlotte Hornets in a couple of weeks.
Listen, we'll hopefully it's not against my Pistons. You know what I mean? And everything. Well, maybe it'll be box office TV after the whole fight a couple of weeks ago, about a month or so ago. But I think we've seen it, right? We've seen it in sports where the young team gets in there and they get hungrier after that. That could be the Carolina Panthers. I understand the upside of Monroe Freeling, but it's like, do you want him starting as he's very inexperienced? Do you want him starting as a rookie left tackle, trying to block the blind side of your quarterback? I don't feel comfortable with that. So I'm like, let Rasheed Walker do his thing. Let Icky, recover from the patella tendon and everything. I just think that makes more sense. So that's why he didn't come off the board until 24. He actually still went to the Browns, but I was like, I have a feeling his stock might be more inflated because he looks like the prototypical tackle. Tape is good, don't get me wrong, But the same way we hold quarterbacks to you're a 1-year starter, we can't draft you so early. We probably should do that with other positions as well, because that means you haven't seen. Blake Miller from Clemson said this at the combine. He said, I've started 54 games consecutive in college football. I've seen everything that you can throw at an offensive line at Clemson, every defensive front, every pressure package. I've seen it all. Guess who hasn't seen it all? Monroe Freeling. He's a 1-year starter. So you're talking about getting into the NFL and having to deal with Chase Young, over there with the Saints and whoever, the different pressure packages you're going to see. That's how you mess with the mind of a young player, and you don't want him to lose confidence too early.
Okay, and it's not just that Blake Miller played 54 straight games at Clemson. I had Eric Macklin on 2 weeks ago. He said he only missed 2 practices. So, that guy was always out there.
Iron Man.
That is crazy for him to do that. And that's a guy that we were also talked about potentially at 19. So, but for Detroit to wrap that up, I think offensive line is probably what they got to look at based off of the struggles they had this past season. I know they were young there, and they've lost some guys to retirement in recent, in the last 2 off seasons. So you really think the offensive line is probably the one spot. If Carolina won at 19, likely they're going to have to wait behind Detroit to get.
Absolutely.
Okay. Cool. Well, let's get to Carolina. Take one more quick pause. We'll come back here and we'll talk about the Panthers and Omar Cooper Jr. going to the Panthers at 19th overall here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. The NBA playoffs are here, where every possession matters, every matchup is magnified, and every game can swing a series. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a great way to get in on the action. Here's what I like about it. You can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. The app makes it easy to follow the action with player stats, trends, and matchups all in one place. And during the playoffs, that extra insight really matters when you're looking at stars, role players, and key moments. It just makes the entire playoff experience more engaging from start to finish. At a huge one here in Uptown Charlotte on Tuesday night, the Hornets in the play-in tournament against the Heat. Biggest game in Uptown in a long time with that organization, in a decade. Last time they played Miami there at home. So go ahead and bet on the Hornets there on FanDuel. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. Okay, so looking at the Panthers, and thank you for the folks that have stuck around, and I hope for everybody watching and listening to the show, you've still gotten a lot out of it, because we're talking about what could happen in front of Carolina and the other needs that these teams have, and we're also breaking down prospects that we've talked about. So great job by Damian for doing that for us, and thank you everyone who stuck around for the show.
Absolutely.
I know you've been waiting to figure out, okay, what's Carolina doing at 19? Damian has him taking Omar Cooper Jr., the wide receiver from Indiana, who did meet with the team 2 weeks ago. Fresh off a national championship, I thought last season he was their best receiver. I did like Elijah Surratt a lot. I think in the playoffs, certainly Charlie Becker was the guy for him. They just had too many dudes there in Indiana. And, of course, Heisman Trophy winner and projected number 1 overall pick Fernando Mendoza spinning the rock there for them this past season. When you look at Omar Cooper Jr., we talked about Carolina needing a guy who could stretch the field. Talk about a yak guy like Casey Concepcion. You have him going 16 to New York. What was it about Omar Cooper Jr. that made you think that he was the right fit for Carolina instead of some of the other receivers who would have been on the board at that point in time?
Similar to what I talked about with Casey Concepcion. With this receiving core, the way it's constructed, you lack explosiveness, you lack speed, and you lack playmaking ability after the catch outside of Tedero and McMillan. Like T-Mac could absolutely make – that was one of my favorite calling cards for him. I was like, after the catch, this is a big guy that he has enough strength to stiff arm you, but he's got elusiveness to put a move on you and get upfield. And he showcased that as a rookie for Bryce Young. But in the slot for me, like Omar Cooper Jr. could play that slot and that zero. And I think I put in my report over at Bleach Report, he becomes a running back after the catch. He's strong, he's dense, he's physical. But then you see
– oh, I heard that before. That sounds like DJ Moore.
And then, crazy enough, if you go look at my report, that's my comp for him is DJ Moore. So that is my exact comp for him right now. I know a lot of people have thrown out different comps. I watched him. I kind of went back and watched some DJ Moore. I was like, man, there's parallels between these two guys. And I'm like, this makes a lot of sense for Carolina. And again, I want to help Bryce with a guy that's just easy to get the ball to, right? Those third and sevens, third and tens. I brought it up, I think last time I was on. That Seattle Seahawks game, no, everybody doesn't have the Seahawks defense, but it's like when you can like physically take away the big receivers, that offense it was constrained, and they didn't have enough playmaking out of the slot. I think Omar Cooper Jr. is a big step over Xavier Legette. Xavier Legette was always a high ceiling pick for me. It's like, hey, you put him in the right spot, he develops, things like that. Carolina did the same thing with Xavier Legette that they did with Jonathan Mingo. Well, we're going to bring you in to be our one. That should have never been the plan. Like, that didn't make sense when it happened. I was like, when they made it with Jonathan Mingo, I was like, guys, there's no. You should have never traded DJ Moore. They actually, Chicago said that we were cool with Brian Burns. You didn't even need to pay him Brian Burns. You should have sent him. And it's easy to draft another edge rusher, in my opinion, where you bring in the quarterback and you have a bare cupboard at receiver, and you force a guy who, I remember being at the Senior Bowl. I was on the sideline, and I saw him up close and personal, Jonathan Mingo. And me and one of my guys, Ray Garver, shot the Ray. He was like, is that a tight end? I didn't know who he was at first. I didn't realize that's who he was. So, is that a tight end? He was like, no. He looked at the helmet. He was like, no, that's Jonathan Mingo. I was like, oh, he's a big dude, man. Like, but then I watched him. I was like, I don't see the ability to separate, things like that. I was like, I'm not in on that. So they did the same thing to Xavier Legette that they did to Mingo. I think when you look at Omar Cooper, the route running is there, the ball skills is there. A guy that's tough. I call him a glue guy. He works between the hashes in the middle of the field, but also he could take the top off the defense. He ran 4.4. I think he jumped 37 plus at the combine. He was like, he just did the athletic stuff, and then he's like, I'm good. I'll see y'all at my pro day with me and Fernando, and I'll run my routes there and everything. But I think he'd be a really good fit, especially missing out on KC. That's 4 receivers gone in the first 16 picks, I believe, with like Carnell Tate, Jordan Tyson, Makai, and KC. Getting Omar Cooper Jr. will help Bryce out a lot. And I at the end of the day, I think with Dan Morgan, yes, you can get another edge. You can go defense again, but you have to ask yourself, we're getting into that territory of picking up your 5th-year option, and we got to start talking contract. You want to make sure, yes, you backdoored your way into the playoffs. I want a winning record this time. I want to actually win the South and win it convincingly. I want Bryce to be the best version of himself. I don't want to have any concerns or questions of if or not he's our guy. Put the weapons around him and let him show you what he can do.
Yeah, Panthers did make the playoffs last year. They went 8-9. Technically, they tied for first place and were able to go to the playoffs via tiebreaker. So I guess they didn't really win the division, but whatever, you'll take it. They have not had a winning record since 2017. They have never had back-to-back winning seasons, and they cannot do that until 2027. That starts with this year. I will say this, just because I'm sure there's listeners who are like probably banging their heads against the wall. The Mingo thing, they had Chark and Thielen coming in to be like the top 2 guys and Mingo to come in, but obviously they were asking a lot out of the guy. There was no competition, which is a mistake that they made. The one thing, at least what we would get, is there was competition. He had to go out and earn that spot, which he easily took from Jonathan Mingo, and they had Deontay Johnson to be the one and Thielen around. So I thought he was in a better spot, but still, I never really felt like he was going to be that guy. If they bring in Omar Cooper Jr., he would, of the last 3 early guys they took, well, hell, the last 4 early guys that they took, he'd be coming in the best situation where he already has T-Mac, who's proven himself. He has Jalen Coker, who's proven himself. And those guys are still young ascending players, where Chark didn't have it. Thielen is older, but was good for them that 1 year. You look at Legette coming in, Johnson, that did not work out at all. Thielen then got hurt. They asked a lot out of him as a rookie. Last year, T-Mac had to be everything, and he stood up to the challenge. This would be, for the first time in a while, a rookie coming in with, yes, expectations, but not having really the weight of the receiver room on his shoulders, not having enough talent in the room to kind of allow him to really grow into that spot. So just want to say that for all the folks out there being like, what is this guy talking about? It's like, guys, relax. It's not that big of a deal. But I do like, I agree with you on the whole breakdown as far as the players are of Legette and Mingo, and do think that Omar Cooper Jr. would be great for Carolina. But they really appreciate that, Damian, coming on, giving us your perspective on those picks that you made in your mock, and also how some of those guys could fit into Carolina, what those teams could do ahead of Carolina, and of course that breakdown of Omar Cooper Jr. Check him out again, Locked On NFL Draft, over on Bleach Report as well, over on social at DP_NFL. Damian Parson does a great job, as you just heard here on the show. Thank you so much, my guy.
Anytime, brother.
Thanks to Damian Parson from Locked On NFL Draft for joining me on today's show, giving us some insight there and what could happen in front of Carolina right as we get to the middle part of the first round of next week's draft up in Pittsburgh. And really interesting to see what happens. He thinks wide receiver Omar Cooper would be the guy to go with. We'll see if the Panthers have a tackle they like on the board or another position once they get to 19. But good insight there from Damian. Again, check him out over on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcasts. And also over on social, doing a great job also on Bleacher Report covering the draft. Again, coming up next week in Pittsburgh. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe and follow the show free over on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council. We're back with you on Friday. Maybe the last time I'm going to do a mailbag. Maybe I'll do one again next week instead of doing a mock draft. I don't think I'm going to do that this year. So at me, DM me. Get those questions in over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council and get those questions in for this Friday. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding. And I will talk to y'all later today on Monday for another prospect of the day.